Welcome to the Sojourn Wealth Management Podcast. My name is Corey Akins, and I'm here with my co-host, Jeff Bronner. Today, we have a very special episode for you. Jeff, tell the people what we're talking about.
We're going to be diving into one of our firm's area of expertise, teachers.
Yeah. And so for those of you who don't know, our firm really focuses on four key areas. Educators, both higher ed and K-12, those in athletics, healthcare, and business owners. And so, Jeff, you typically host this podcast, so I'm taking over for you today, which is cool. But also,
it's nice to be in the less controlled seat. Yeah.
So this is also a topic that is close to home for you, right? Because you came from this space, the education space. Tell me a little bit about that.
That's right. Yeah. So I graduated from the University of Tennessee with my English literature degree, and then went on to get my master's in secondary education with a licensure in English as a second language. I went on to teach locally here at South Doyle Middle School for a couple of years before moving and transitioning into financial advising, financial planning.
Yeah. So now that you've kind of been on the other side of the education side, and then now on the financial planning side, what do you think is unique about teachers and those folks that are in that demographic as it relates to planning and finances?
Yeah, one of the things that distinguishes teachers, and when we talk about teachers, educators, talking about teachers, administrators, people who can work in the central office staff, these are folks who participate in a non-voluntary pension benefit or defined benefit plan. So there's a kind of baked into the picture a retirement benefit that they automatically walk into. And a lot of times they don't know how that works, how that operates. But everybody in that space is enrolled in it. And in the state of Tennessee, that's called the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System.
Yeah. So that's essentially the pension plan is what you're talking about, right? So as far as challenges, opportunities, you kind of have a inside view of that. Again, being a teacher, what were some of those challenges that you saw from that perspective, and then talk about some of the opportunities as well?
Yeah. So one thing that is absolutely difficult for an educator is when you go into, specifically if this is your first year teaching, right? You'll go into the beginning of the school year and you'll have about a week of professional development and administrative days. And in those 5 business days or so, you'll have all of these trainings that you need to go through, all of these different team collaborative efforts, whether that be at a grade level, a content level, what have you. Just a lot of different demands on your time in those first 5 days. And that's also the time where administrators at your local school will have to walk you through whatever training elements are required by the state at that point in time. Different like child abuse reporting type stuff and things of that nature, kind of legalese that you'll have to go through and kind of check the box to say that we've done this, we know how the policy works, and we can go forward with the year. And so you have all these demands on your time, all the while you're also wanting to kind of prepare for, students being in the building in a couple of days. And so you're getting your classroom ready, you're getting your first lesson ready, you're setting expectations and making sure that everything's kind of aligned around that. And also during those administrative days, you'll typically be presented with the retirement information.
Yeah.
And it's pretty much the furthest thing from your mind at that point. And so I remember when I got hired in and we were going through, and our admin did a good job of kind of walking us through everything, keeping everything upbeat and not overwhelming us with kind of mundane information for 5 hours straight. But I remember we got to the retirement slide and it was basically like 2 slides. Here's your retirement plan. If you have any questions, call central office. Yeah. Click. And so when I was working, I really had no idea what exactly I was contributing to, or
was it ever top of mind for you?
No.
Okay.
No. Particularly as a young teacher, it's one of the last things you're thinking about. Because then once students are in the building, goodness gracious, it's 24/7 you got relationships on your mind. You got kids in the building. You got folks you're trying to work with. You got, who knows how many scenarios that you're trying to work through, what have you. And so, no, it was never top of mind. So that's one of the biggest challenges is helping a teacher plan, or a teacher just in general planning long-term for themselves. You got to start with that educational component of comprehending what they're actually participating in.
Yeah. So now, having been there and now you're a financial advisor, what do you see as the opportunities to help people there in that career path?
Yeah, it's a great question, because the challenge initially of understanding what the TCRS benefit is, and then once you're able to get that education, once somebody can sit down and explain that to you, you have the ability then to leverage that benefit to your favor. And just kind of, if nobody's explained to you, listener, and you're curious what it is, it's a pension, which means that, and the reason I say defined benefit, the reason it's called a defined benefit, is when you enter into your employment contract with your whatever school district you're at, you're essentially agreeing to receive this benefit under these conditions. And those conditions are how long you work, how much you earn, and those are plugged into an equation. That's the defined benefit. It's defined. You can plug in numbers to project what you're going to get further down the road, because you have these variables. They're calculatable. And so once you understand what that is, you can then project, this is how much I'm going to be earning from a fixed income standpoint from my pension. And that gives you essentially an income floor in retirement, which means that you'll have a clearer picture of what you're going to need to earn above and beyond that income floor in order to maintain your lifestyle, pursue retirement goals. And it kind of puts you a little bit ahead of the average investor, because for the rest of the general public, you have your investment assets and you have Social Security. And so once you understand how that works, then you can start designing an investment strategy that tailors to that.
Yeah.
Which allows you in other parts of your portfolio to pursue more growth, because you're not relying so much on your investments to be the main income source in retirement. And that opens up not just longevity opportunities, extending your retirement or shortening, your working life to where you can retire earlier, protect against longevity in the long run, increase your legacy opportunity, what have you.
It's also one of those things where in our world, information is key.
Mm-hmm.
And so it takes one of the variables, a large portion of the variable out of it, right? So for instance, if you work for 30 years, typically in the state of Tennessee, and, are hired after 2014, you're part of the hybrid system, like you're going to make about 30% of what you were in retirement, what you were making before you retired. And so like 30% is a good bit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can plan for that in conjunction with Social Security, that's a pretty big deal, and it helps give clarity to something down the road. And it's also one of those things where it's happening just because you're showing up, right? It's not dependent on any other outside human behavior. It's basically just you showing up and going to work. So cool. Why do you think most educators are unfamiliar or just have obstacles, barriers to entry as far as just understanding the plan, and then planning, using that information to plan and have, a retirement that is robust?
I think there's a couple different things. The big one, and I'll just kind of reiterate, is the time dynamic. It requires a lot of time to sit down, and with time, cognitive energy, and a lot of times you're just spent by the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of squeeze out more of that cognitive energy to think through, learn, educate from a self-motivated standpoint in order to plan long term. There's also a lot of expertise that's required to do it. So not only would it be difficult just to kind of walk into it as a layman, but then also, to learn everything you need to learn in order to learn what you need to know. if that makes sense. Let me say that again.
Say that one more time.
Learn everything you need to learn in order to learn everything you need to know.
Wow. Yeah.
So, and one of the things after I came into financial planning, I pursued a designation that would specifically tailor my expertise toward people in this space. So a chartered retirement planning counselor, and that CRPC designation essentially equips me with more understanding of pension benefits, how they align with Social Security. How can we develop different income building strategies in order to, maximize our opportunity with our investment portfolio? So I did that because, there's just a lot that goes into not just learning your benefit, but then applying that in an actual tangible scenario. So the time, the expertise is a barrier to entry, and that can be overwhelming. And so for a lot of folks, what ends up happening, because they lack those things, they'll push it off down the road. It'll be something like either A, I don't want to think about that right now, or B, kind of the more cynical mindset of I'm never going to retire. That's just not me. I'm going to work until I die kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you don't want to have that mindset. Nobody wants to have that mindset, but it's kind of a default mindset that we create so that we can avoid having to go through the labor it would require to actually plan for that.
It's interesting too, because I've heard that, I'm never going to retire. I'm going to die here.
Mm-hmm.
So that assumes something that we have no control over, right? One, it assumes that you're able to work until you die, and that an employer wants you to work there until you die, right? So I think that just highlights the importance of it as well, because you may not have the option to just continue working until that time. So as far as your specialty in working with teachers, obviously being a teacher, that lends itself to you kind of understanding the language, understanding what they're going through. I know you've talked a lot about just the time piece. Like, is there anything technical that you would say is kind of within your designation and helping people plan with the TCRS? Just unpack a little bit of that and kind of your process.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things would be when you're looking at long-term planning, you want to kind of categorize the different means by which you're going to provide for your various needs. So when we talk about income planning and we're looking at something like a defined benefit, let's look at the projection of how much that's going to earn you. Let's forecast like that future value. Let's make sure that whatever the need is going to be in future dollars. Let's make sure that whatever cost of living adjustment that is incorporated into the TCRS, for example, is going to meet that need and anticipate inflation on a long-term basis. And then in addition to that, how is that going to intersect with Social Security? When are you going to draw Social Security? What meets your goals and your needs best? Drawing earlier, drawing later, full retirement age, delaying it to 70. What does that look like? And then from there, you also look at things like, how much have I saved into my 403B? How much have I saved in my 401k? Is that pre-tax? Is that post-tax? How do we, after retirement,
which do you take first?
Do you take first? That's a great question. How do we sequence our distributions? And after you've met things like income need, then you can look at things like, all right, well, I have a larger traditional account value, meaning that these dollars are pre-tax. Well, one thing we can look at is, hey, let's convert those to Roth dollars so that when you hit 73 or 75 in a couple of years, when this changes, the required minimum distribution age, that is, you won't have your income hiked up because you're having to distribute a bunch of these traditional dollars all at once in your 70s. So those are all things that you would want to look at when you're trying to build a robust income plan. You want to see what are the advantages and what are the unforeseen circumstances that you might not be thinking of, and how can you best, again, build a sequence of income, a sequence of distribution that fits your goals rightly.
Yeah, one that's efficient too, right?
Right.
So as we wrap up, what would you want if teacher, administrator, staff member is listening to this podcast? What's kind of the key takeaway for them?
Well, the biggest thing I would say is I understand the constraints on time and how overwhelming education can be. And so the first thing I would say is I sympathize with that, and I understand that that can be very difficult for folks, particularly younger teachers. It's a lot to wrap your mind around. It's a lot to figure out initially at the onset of everything. And so I wouldn't want them to feel discouraged by that. And if they're, later in the game and they're looking towards retirement and they're kind of kicking themselves for not starting this conversation sooner, I would say, hey, that's okay. Better now than never.
Yeah.
One of the things I used to tell folks when I would do presentations for educators at different schools and things like that. So I was like, when is the best time to plant an apple tree? Well, it would have been 25 years ago because you'd be eating apple pie today. But if it's not then start now so you can eat 25 years from now.
Yeah.
So don't delay it any further if you have delayed it. Don't be discouraged if you feel overwhelmed. There's a lot that you have to understand and unpack. And that's why I'm in this space that I'm in now, is to help folks bridge that gap.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Well, Jeff, I appreciate the time. I know that the listeners will find it valuable, and we're going to do more of these short form episodes just on particular topics. So we look forward to bringing those to you.
As do I. Thanks, Corey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sojourn Wealth Management Podcast. This is a friendly reminder that all content in this podcast is intended for educational purposes alone. Nothing in this episode should be treated as tax, legal, or investment advice. We encourage you to consult your financial professional for any of those needs. Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, Kestra IS, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Advisory Services, LLC, Kestra AS, an affiliate of Kestra IS. Kestra IS or Kestra AS are not affiliated with Sojourn Wealth Management, LLC.